in and out of the Beltway. From large cities to small towns to the rural heartland. From sea to shining sea. This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. Inside the News.
Welcome back to the program Inside the News. Glad to have you this week, and we welcome all our radio affiliates as we do each and every week. Our listeners, we thank you all across the nation, and even those who are listening on streaming platforms of your various stations. And we welcome AUN TV and YouTube as well. But we first have to welcome the guys who make up the substance of the show. Mr. Frank Vernuccio, he's in the top left. He's from New York State. How are you doing today, Frank?
Great to be with you, and thanks to our audience for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. And Ben Brunson, he's in the bottom middle if you're watching us on TV. And Ben, how you doing?
I am doing great, Guy. It's a pleasure to be with you and Frank once again.
Hey, how's the Mouse House doing? You're pretty close to that.
Well, I went there not too long ago, and it was pretty crowded. Apparently, they're accepting only a third of the normal crowd, but it seemed to have a fair amount of business.
All right. And Frank, we have to find out, what state are you in this week?
The deluge state of New York. It continues to snow and rain just about every day.
Oh, my goodness. Isn't that the truth? Okay. First question up, and on the dibs here. And doesn't it feel the collective we, I'm talking about we as America, are kind of like rudderless right now? In other words, we don't have a firm grip on where we are going. It's like a sailboat in the middle of the water, but doesn't have a rudder and really doesn't have any wind to guide it anywhere, Frank.
Well, the problem is that the United States seems to be split in two. On one side is the progressive movement, media, and academia, and on the other side is just about everyone else. And when you talk to your neighbors, your friends, your family, and then you listen to the nightly news or the nightly talk shows or the nightly comedy shows with those idiots who come on late at night, you're getting two entirely different pictures of America, two entirely different philosophies. And because you can't have a ship that can go in two directions at once, that's why there's that feeling of rudderlessness, simply because the institutions that portray America in the media and in the classroom are completely divorced from the reality of what everyday Americans are actually thinking and needing.
Okay, Ben, your thought about this rudderless nation.
Well, we have a party and a president who appear to be committed and cannot break the mold of this concept that we are going down the wrong path, that it's dark times ahead. I think they have tunnel vision, and the tunnel vision is that they are gaining power. These emergency powers, of course, New York should abolish their emergency power legislation immediately and open up the economy. The news is actually great. The vaccines work. The whole point of this vaccination program in getting it going was to get to where we are. Infections are plummeting, deaths are plummeting, hospitalizations are plummeting. And that's not just true in the United States. It's true everywhere in the world, Europe, Israel, other places that have an ongoing and active vaccine program underway. And all of these places are targeting the most vulnerable crowd, those who are over 65, and the results speak for themselves. It's great news. We can reopen, we can get going. I was recently watching a YouTuber who a couple of weeks ago walked the streets of San Francisco. Apparently he lives in San Francisco. And then his next YouTube video, he took a flight to Miami and he walked the streets of Miami Beach and South Beach. And he made the comparison, and it was really quite dramatic. When he was walking through his home city of San Francisco, he said the one word he used to characterize what was going on is fear. There was a lot of fear among San Franciscans. It was very palpable, and it was fear of the virus more than anything else that has really a result of this ongoing propaganda campaign. And we saw that in full swing with the president doing a eulogy to the nation over reaching this 500,000 death milestone, which, yes, that's tragic. And we can talk about the reality of those 500,000 deaths and how many are truly COVID deaths, but he is emphasizing the negative. All we have to do is open the economy, and we will get back very quickly to where we were pre-COVID. We're down 10 million jobs because a huge chunk of the service economy is still actively shut down by liberal governors like Governor Cuomo and Governor Newsom.
Mm-hmm.
Just open the economy back. We're ready to go. But you would think, again, this is a recurring theme, you would think that President Biden would be the number one cheerleader to open up the economy so he could claim a great victory. Instead, our leader is talking down our economy at a time when we should be doing just the opposite. It makes no sense.
Macabre sense of humor here is that how do you stop the flu deaths in this nation each year? You have the COVID deaths, because that's what's happened. I think they've transferred the flu deaths into the COVID column. Frank,
exactly right.
Huh?
That's exactly right. You look at the numbers, 500,000. The CDC did a review of this in August. At the time when we were closing in on 200,000 deaths, they did an in-depth analysis of those deaths. 6% by their numbers were directly attributed to COVID. Of the deaths to date, 94% had other comorbidities, other issues, other contributing factors, mainly representing the fact that it is older people who have succumbed to this disease. So the reality is, at that time, if you look at 500,000 deaths, you can say 30,000 or so are directly attributed to COVID and purely a result of COVID exposure. All of the rest, 470,000 or so deaths, using CDC statistics, have comorbidities. COVID was a contributor, but hey, these were people who were older, they had diabetes, whatever it was, and COVID was a contributor. So that's the reality, just like flu is a contributor in a typical year. So your point, Guy, is exactly on point, and that we've essentially transferred all the historic flu deaths into the COVID column. And keep in mind, on any given year, we have close to 3 million people who die in this country. So you would have expected 3 million deaths. It's mostly older people, and they're just attributing a lot of that to COVID. That's the reality.
I just got my flu vaccine a month ago from the doctor, and he did not have it in his office in November. And it was quite interesting because, you know, I did have the COVID. I tested positive, but that was just for 2 weeks, and then I got a negative. And so it was like in and out, and that, and I didn't really feel anything. But I think by getting the flu vaccine, which is a derivative of COVID, I think I've averted that. Frank, I want to go back to something that Ben did say, that what Biden is doing and everything. And I wrote down a note here. You write your essays. I wrote a little sentence here. It says, Trump took their lane. Trump took the lane. So he took the middle of America. He took the working man's lane, which has always been the Democrats' strong point. And guess what? Trump took it. Now, Biden doesn't have that anymore. He doesn't have those unions like he had before because Trump stole it. And now they are doing everything possible to be so anti-Trump that they are going way outside where they should be.
Well, you know, of course, there's this civil war within the unions themselves. I opened up by saying that, you know, there's two Americas, as the left always used to like to say. But in this case, it's the media, academia on one side and everybody else on the other side. Well, even within the union movement now, you're seeing this divorce between union leadership and union rank and file. Union leadership endorsed a president whose first act was to put thousands of union workers out of a job, and whose ongoing policy is to continue that in other industries as well. So that's one of the reasons why you see that real breakup, that this disjointedness. I want to go back to the spread of COVID at this point. Mm-hmm. While the news, as Ben said, is indeed good thanks to the vaccinations and common sense, we possibly are in danger of another new outbreak of COVID on a wide scale. As President Biden decides to open up the American borders to people coming in on massive numbers on our southern border, you're going to see people who are unvaccinated, untested, unchecked, flooding into the United States, which could reinstitute a new wave of COVID infections. It is an act of governmental insanity, I think almost unprecedented in terms of immigration policy. Several years ago, long before COVID was on anyone's radar, the union representing, or the organization representing border guards, was reporting massive cases of diseases and infections that had been unseen in the United States in decades, if not for over a century, a result of illegal immigration. People coming from backward areas in Latin America and South America, bringing diseases that have been all but eradicated in the United States. Now you're having people coming in, again, on an unchecked basis, thanks to President Biden's policies, who are going to reinstitute COVID as a massive infection, and are also going to bring in numerous other diseases. This White House is asleep at the switch.
Yeah, it kind of reminds you of the measles, the MMRs that everybody got. And we pretty much got rid of that, or polio. And if someone, in TB, tuberculosis, and all of those others that we have spent a lot of time doing. And you look at the island that they used to come through over there at New York. It begins with letter E, and I can't.
Ellis Island.
Ellis Island, that's right. And they used to come in, and one of the first things they did was examine them health-wise to make sure that nothing was going to come into this country. And now the door is wide open. Frank, you've done an excellent job of getting us and segueing us to the immigration policy. Ben, go.
Well, we have a policy that has no sense to it other than a political agenda to flood the zone with potential Democratic voters. So when you combine open borders with open voting, and we have these bills floating around Congress that will essentially abolish any type of ID system for voting. So if you show up and you can fog a mirror, here's a ballot, cast your vote. That is where the Democrats want to go. They want to have illegals perpetually flooding into the country and picking up what they presume will be overwhelmingly Democratic votes. And statistics and analysis show that they're generally right. Illegals who come in from the southern border typically will vote Democratic because that's the party who hands out things to them and supports their pathway to citizenship. That is the only strategy behind what we're seeing on the immigration policies of the Biden administration. Economically, they make no sense whatsoever. Our economy is moving in an ever increasing way towards high-tech jobs, towards smart jobs, towards high education jobs. You need an education, you need a full grounding in the English language, you need a grounding in science and coding. That's where the future is for this economy. And I stated on a recent show that we have this complete incompatibility where the federal government is opening the floodgates to illegal immigrants who typically take low wage, minimum wage jobs in this country. And at the same time, they want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, which will eliminate millions of jobs in this country, the jobs that these immigrants typically will go fill. So this makes absolutely no sense. It's a chaotic prescription driven by only one thing, a desire to pick up votes, to stuff the ballot box. We talked about stuffing the ballot box in the last election. This is a way to stuff the ballot box with millions of votes. And there's a target state in mind. It's Texas. This desire to turn Texas from a red state into a blue state, that is the real driving force behind these immigration policies.
Wow, there's another segue there, Texas, because we want to talk about the utility grid, and a shout out to DJ Kesterson of KEYS in Corpus Christi. He communicated with me over the weekend that they were out of power for a short time, and our thoughts and prayers are with them. And I said, if there's anything we can do, we'd love to help them out, and their power is back on. But the utility grid, we've talked about this before, Frank, it is in desperate need of an overhaul.
Yeah, in more ways than one. We've talked also on the show about the possibility of an EMP incident, which could literally turn off all the power in the in the lower 48 at least, in a second. EMPs can come from both natural causes. One happened in the 1850s. Of course, there wasn't much in terms of electronics then, just telegraph lines, but they were shut down. Or it can come from an enemy attack. one single nuclear weapon detonated at the right altitude over the United States can completely and totally destroy the entire electrical grid of the lower 48. The electrical grid has been in need, as you said, of upgrading for a long time. There is a dispute going on. The government seems to think that it is the duty of the grid owners, the private companies, to harden their facilities. The facility owners say that because this is a defense type of situation, the government should pay for it. The annoying part of all this is that a lot of these upgrades can be done for less than $20 billion. Seems like a lot of money, but in reality, when you look at things like the Obama stimulus package, which was $800 billion, and the man said he couldn't find anything to do with the money that was shovel ready, well, that would have been one great shovel ready job.
All right, we've got to take our first time out. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.